A very good morning to everyone on the platform. Committee Secretary, can we confirm that we have a quorum, please?
Good morning, Chair, and everyone on the platform. Chair, we correct. Shall I proceed with the roll call, Chair?
Please do so.
Ms. Moatse? Ms. Moatse is on the platform, Chair. Mr. Mbuyani?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Good colleagues, I'm present. Thank you very much.
Ms. Hloniana, Chair?
Good morning, Chair. I hope you have a lovely day today. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Good morning to the most happy PC member. Good morning.
Dr. Ntwane?
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, colleagues. I'm present.
Good morning. I think you're second in line for the most optimistic sound.
Mr. Monakedi?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I am here. I'm present. Thank you.
Morning.
Mr. Mulder?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all. My name is Jaco Mulder, and I'm also present.
Oh, wow. We're going to have a good day today. Good morning.
Mr. Malamatia, Chair?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Happy mood. I'm present. Thank you.
Morning.
Chair, as we said, Ms. Moatse is on the platform, Chair. Those are all members currently on the platform, Chair. The others may still join us.
Okay, that's great. Can we have the agenda, please? Yeah, let's check if there are any apologies.
Recording in progress.
Chair, I have not received any formal apologies. I will indicate if I received during the course of the meeting, Chair.
Okay. Can we have a move and a seconder for the adoption of the agenda? Dr. Ntwane?
Chair, I move for the adoption of the agenda.
Thank you. Honorable Mbuyani?
Chairperson, thank you very much. I second the adoption of the agenda as reflected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our agenda is duly adopted. So the purpose of the briefing today by the National Credit Regulator is to engage on its financial and non-financial performance for the first, second and third quarters of the 2023-24 financial year. This is so that the committee can assess the performance of the National Department against its resource allocation in compliance with the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act No. 9 of 2009, as the National Credit Regulator receives a portion of their funding as an annual transfer from the National Department's budget allocation. So we want to ensure that it is achieving its set quarterly performance targets given its available resources. Can I just check Committee Secretary, who is on the platform, to introduce the entity from the department?
Chair, the department indicated Ms. Matumela.
Okay.
That will do the introduction, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Matumela.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members. Chairperson from the GTIC Group, we thank the committee for the opportunity to present ourselves to the committee this morning. With me, Chairperson, I have Zandile Brown, who is from the Consumer and Corporate Regulation Branch. And from the NCR side, Chairperson, we have the CEO, Ms. Nomsa Motsekgare. She is with her executive team, Chairperson, and she will introduce the team as she begins the presentation, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, CEO. You may share your presentation. You are very welcome, Ms. Motshegare.
Sorry, I was just struggling to unmute. I'm not used to Zoom.
Okay. Oh, is it? Okay. You do work physically.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members, DTIC officials, that is Ms. Matomela and Ms. Brown. I have with me the executive team and the manager risk and audit. In terms of the executive team, we have the CFO, Ms. Lynette de Beer, and we have the senior legal advisor, Ms. Ntupa Magolego, and we also have Advocate Kidilatile Logodi, who's also who's the company secretary and also a debt counseling manager. But we also have with us the manager risk and audit, Ms. Maputi Ramohala. Our PA, executive PA, Ms. Bolena Metzing, will project the presentation. This presentation, Honorable Chair, will cover 3 quarters. But before we go into the presentation, I'm just going to give a very brief summary of the presentation. The DTIC began a process of adopting a revised output-driven planning system in 2023-24, which requires all entities to shift from just reporting on activities, but to focus mainly on impact targets. The objective of this is to combine all the DTIC's and its entities' efforts towards creating real impact in South Africa and for South Africans. 45 output targets were introduced by the DTIC, to which the NCR makes a critical contribution to 7 of these. Implementation of these outputs also takes account of the challenging fiscal environment in which government is operating. The presentation therefore covers both the core mandate of the NCR, together with the 7 output targets I made mention of earlier. The strategic focus during this planning period include, in terms of the non-financial performance information, improved regulatory environment as Program 1. The Program 2 talks to enforcement of the National Credit Act. In both these programs, we will conduct our own impact assessments in terms of the impact that we are making in the industry. We'll do that each year, but for the 3rd year, we will get an external service provider who will be appointed to conduct an impact assessment to indicate the impact that the NCR is making in the industry in terms of the work that we do. We will also cover the NCR's contribution to the outputs introduced by the DTIC. With your permission, Honorable Chair, I will cover the first few slides, which provides an overview of the credit landscape. I will then hand over the non-financial performance information to the acting company secretary and debt counseling manager, Advocate Kidilatile Logodi, and the CFO will make a presentation on the financial performance of the NCR. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, CEO. Can we just ask the person who is projecting to put it in your presentation in slide mode?
Yes, there is Chair Paulina.
It seems like, okay.
Yeah,
it's still not in slide mode because this, I don't know, is this a PDF document?
but it's on my side, Honorable Chair. It seems to be on.
Okay, let us not waste any time
I
because we
don't know
can
whether
see.
everybody can see the slide.
Yeah, proceed.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I've made the introductions. Next slide, please. The overview of the presentation is going to cover all these areas, Chair. It's quite a lengthy presentation, so I will not go into this individual items for now. Next slide, please. And that's the NCR's vision and mission in terms of what is required of us to do, under the mandate of the National Credit Act, to promote a South African consumer credit market that is fair, transparent, accessible, and dynamic. And in terms of our mission, to support the social and economic advancement of South Africa by regulating for a fair, non-discriminatory market for access to consumer credit and promoting responsible credit granting, use, and effective redress. Next slide, please. That's our legislative mandate, Chair, to promote a fair, non-discriminatory marketplace for access to consumer credit, but also to provide for general regulation of consumer credit and improve standards of consumer information, to prohibit certain unfair credit and credit marketing practices, promote responsible credit granting and use, prohibit reckless lending granting, and provide for debt restructuring in cases of over-indebtedness. And this is where debt counselors come in, and to regulate credit information by regulating credit bureaus, and to promote a consistent enforcement framework relating to consumer credit. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the types of entities that we regulate. We have registered about 6,900 credit providers, 7 alternative dispute resolution agents, about 56 credit bureaus, 1,500 debt counselors, and 4 payment distribution agents. Payment distribution agents are companies that have been registered with the NCR, are regulated by the NCR to distribute money from over-indebted consumers. They collect money from over-indebted consumers who are in debt review and distribute this to credit providers. The total gross debtors book as at the end of September 2023 was sitting at 2.3 trillion. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the statistical information that we collect and publish on a quarterly basis, as at end of September 2023, 142 billion had been extended by the end of that quarter. And as you can see from the table, Honorable Chair, most of that went towards mortgages, followed by secured credit, which is mostly driven by vehicle finance. Next slide, please. And that is the provincial distribution. It has always been that the leading provinces in terms of credit granted is Gauteng, followed by KwaZulu-Natal and then Western Cape, and the other provinces follow. Next slide, please. We can safely say that by the end of the third quarter, in terms of the registered credit providers, the industry was, the size of the credit industry was sitting at 2.3 trillion. And obviously, a chunk of that is mortgages, followed by secured credit and so forth. Next slide, please. That's the debtors book per sector. We've got the industry, which constitutes banks, retailers, non-bank vehicle financiers, and other credit providers. And a lot of that money has gone towards, a lot of those loans are covered by the banks. Next slide, please. And that's a summary of our performance as at end of September. The number of targets that we set out, for ourselves to achieve were 12. As at end of September, we had achieved 33%, exceeded 33%, and the rest of the targets will be reported on after the fourth quarter, and they are mainly around enforcement action that is required to be taken, even though we do take enforcement action throughout the year, but we report on enforcement action taken in our APP at the end of the financial year. With that, with your permission, Chair, as I indicated, I'm now going to hand over to the Acting Company Secretary and Debt Counseling Manager, who's also an Executive Committee member, Advocate Gidilati Lelekhodi. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate. You may proceed. Can you unmute yourself? Can I
She's
just-
struggling to, sorry, Honorable Chair. She says
Okay.
she's struggling to unmute. I saw that on the chat box. So let me continue.
Okay. Yeah, otherwise, let's see if the committee secretary can help her.
Yes, let me just check quickly. Pauline, are
Chair,
you able to assist from your side?
Yes.
And Kidi, the mute, if you want to unmute, it's at the bottom of the screen. Honorable Chair, we are all not used to Zoom. We normally
Oh, do you use Teams?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But
Chair,
let me
I'm not also
continue,
able
Chair.
to unmute. I don't know for whatever reason, Chair.
Okay. I think you must just continue, please.
I will
CEO.
continue. I will continue, Chair. Thank
Okay.
you. So in terms of program one, program one talks to improve regulatory environment. Here we set our target for the year to conduct 1,500 consumer education and awareness campaigns. And by the end of the third quarter, we needed to have conducted 1,200 of these campaigns. We exceeded the target, and this was as a result of the number of, increased number of invitations that we received from the various partners and stakeholders that we work with. And there was also an interest from the media releases that we published. And hence, we were able to do, a lot in that area. We, as I indicated, we also look at the impact of the work that we do. So we are required by the end of the year to have produced 4 evaluation reports on activities relating to the educational campaigns, investigations, complaints evaluations, compliance monitoring, and debt counseling and enforcement reports that looks at the impact of the work that we do. So far, we have, in terms of the 3 quarters, we were required to produce 3 evaluation reports. That was done. We achieved the target. Next slide, please. These are the consumer education and awareness activities that we conduct throughout the year. We make use of radio interviews, we conduct workshops, we issue media releases, we conduct webinars, there are mall activations and podcasts, and that's the list. I will not go through the whole list, Chair, but that's the list of activities in terms of consumer education and awareness activities. Next slide, please. These are pictures showing some of the areas that we visited. We raised awareness, we worked, and we even signed an MOU with the University of the Free State, together with the National Consumer Commission. We also, worked together with the Gauteng Office of the Consumer Affairs. We conducted a workshop for the elderly in Mamelodi. Next slide, please. We worked with the NCC and the Limpopo Office of the Consumer Protector under the Department of Economic Development and the Environment and Tourism, raising awareness at Beggars Fort. The other municipality that we went to was Bergville, educated municipality employees there on their rights and responsibilities in as far as the National Credit Act is concerned. Next slide, please. We participated in a youth expo in El Dorado, and we also, through the invitation of the DTIC, participated in a national youth, celebration event in Bloemfontein, exhibited at the, at the Youth Day celebration at Patrice Molemela Stadium in Bloemfontein. Next slide, please. those are some of the areas where we, partnered with other stakeholders in the various provinces and municipalities. Next slide, please. And that continues. That's one of the examples of the outside broadcast with Ukhozi FM that we conducted at Imondlo Mall. And the consumer education activities with ICASA I am not going to sorry, Jem, there might be a problem with the spelling there, but it's a shopping center in Ehlanzeni district municipality. Next slide, please. Yeah, that continues. I'm not going to go through that, Chair. Those are the additional community outreach programs that we participated in. We also were involved with the FSCA. We do a lot of work with the FSCA in consumer education activities. Next slide, please. And these are the different provinces that where we are able to continue to conduct, our consumer education outreach programs, but also other awareness campaigns through the different platforms of vehicles that I showed in one of my slides, to be able to reach all these municipalities. Next slide, please. We continued to disseminate information in various ways in these municipalities. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the same program, which is around improved regulatory environment, we have improved our registration processes, and that's why we're able to exceed target in registering persons and entities in the consumer credit market. We were able to register these entities. 99% applications were registered within 7 business days. Next slide, please. I've spoken about that, and obviously what that does is that, we then are able to facilitate the creation of small businesses in instances where people are starting new businesses through registering with the National Credit Regulator. Next slide, please. These are the different, that's the certificate for credit providers and window decals that we always show to consumers to say, for any one consumer, if they want to know if an entity or person is registered with the National Credit Regulator, they must look out for these documents. The certificate has to be pasted on the wall. The window decals normally, you are able to see the window decals from outside because they normally paste them on, windows or, glass panes. Next slide, please. And in terms of our registration stats, those are the provinces that have been covered in the 3 quarters. Next slide, please. Program 2 talks to enforcement of the National Credit Act. And by the end of the financial year, we are required to have conducted 410 investigations on credit providers relating to reckless lending. As at end of September, we had exceeded that target, well, the year's target already, but for the 3 quarters, our target was 317. And this is due to, some of the, innovative approaches that we use. There are instances where we would take, staff from other departments to help with the inspections or the investigations. Next slide, please. We were also required by the end of September to conduct 150 investigations on debt cancelling relating to compliance with the National Credit Act. We were able to, far exceed that target. This is the first time we've had to include this target in the APP. And we did that because we were getting a number of complaints relating to the conduct of debt cancellers, and we felt we needed to focus, on investigating, these debt councillors. And that's why the target was exceeded. Next slide, please. And in terms of investigations by province and district municipalities, those are the provinces and municipalities that we were able to cover. Next slide, please. And that continues on this slide. And we conducted 15 raids in six provinces. In other provinces, those were individual, investigations relating to specific, credit providers. But here, normally, when we conduct raids, we do that in partnership with the police. And we were able to, we discovered that, some of these credit providers retain consumers, instruments, bank cards, SASSA cards, in other instances, ID books. Next slide, please. So those are the raids. The raids were conducted in these areas. Those are the provinces and against those district municipalities. And some of these credit providers since then have been referred to the National Consumer Tribunal. We are still in the processes of referring some, and we also issued compliance notices to others. Next slide, please. So, in order to improve compliance by credit bureaus in respect of credit reports issued for employment purposes, a removal of record of debt adjustments or judgments, automatic removal of adverse consumer credit information and paid up judgments, we are required to conduct 4 by the end of, we're required to conduct 4 investigations or compliance monitoring, of 4 of these credit bureaus, and we were able to achieve that target. Next slide, please. Now, by the end of September, we were required to evaluate 100% annual compliance reports that are certified by independent auditors, submitted by credit bureaus for their 2022 financial year. So after the 2022 financial year, we would normally in 2023, start, conducting those evaluations. But by the end of the financial year, we need to make sure that 100% of these annual compliance that are certified by independent auditors have been submitted, and that we were able to achieve target already by the end of September, because normally the evaluations are done in the first quarter of the financial year. Next slide, please. Okay, I spoke about the, looking at the impact of the work that we do. By the end of September, we were required to produce 3 progress reports on the impact of enforcement action taken on entities and persons that were found to be non-compliant in the previous year. So we look at the work that we did in the previous year, enforcement action that was taken in that year, and each quarter, we produce a report. By the end of September, we had, produced these 3 progress reports. At the end of the year, we will produce a full report which looks at the impact that the impact that we made in taking enforcement action against non-compliant entities and persons. Next slide, please. There are refunds and credit account balance adjustments of about 96.7 million that were made to consumers as a result of our complaints evaluations, compliance monitoring, and the investigations that we conducted. Next slide, please. During those 3 quarters, 2 registrants were referred to the NCT, and 2 debt councillors' registrations were cancelled, where 1 debt councillor's registration was suspended for a period of 2 years by the National Consumer Tribunal. Okay, now I'm going to take you through, as I indicated, the contribution that NCR is making towards the 45 target outputs that the DTIC introduced. We are contributing to 7 of those outputs. We are required, or we were required to have, to achieve 75% of procurement spend on SMMEs and or women and or youth. We were able to exceed that target because our procurement spends, was sitting at 93.6 by the end of September. We were required to conduct 16 workshops in areas outside the 5 main metros to support SMMEs. We conducted 17 workshops. Next slide, please. And in terms of this particular priority output, we were required to register 750 entities and persons to support opportunities for job creation. We exceeded that target. We were able to issue 1,616 certificates. We were required to produce a report on compliance with conditions of registration provided for in Section 48 of the NCA by credit providers. And Section 48 refers to, if you see, and we apologize for the font size there, but Section 48 really talks about the fact that credit providers, once they are registered, they are supposed to submit a report by the anniversary of their registration to report on their compliance with the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. And normally those reports, once we have done our assessment, we refer those reports to the commission. We managed to produce such a report. There's one report that we're supposed to compile and to produce, and 2 reports on market concentration. By the end of September, we are required to produce 1 report that was achieved. A report on market concentration was produced, and this basically looks at the types of entities that they are. Obviously the banks are the ones that really, as I indicated in my stats, borrow more money to consumers. In terms of this priority output, NCR is supposed to profile 40 by the end of September, 40 success stories through our stakeholder engagements, advertising campaigns, and awareness activities. We were not able to achieve this target because we had issues with the travel agency. This was around a payment dispute, which has since been resolved, and we are confident that by the end of the year, the 50 success stories will have been profiled. The next output talks to community outreach initiatives and consumer education and awareness completed in 52 district municipalities. We were able to exceed that target, and this is through the different platforms, the various platforms or vehicles that I referred to in my previous slide. Next slide, next slide, please. These are some of our, these are our main challenges as the NCR. Obviously, we are all facing, government is facing financial constraints, and as a result, we were, like all other entities, required to return some of the allocated funding back to National Treasury. So because of insufficient funding, we are looking at reviewing, registration fees. We are working also together with IFC, which is an arm of the World Bank, that's the International Finance Corporation, to provide, they will be providing technical support to the NCR so that we can then prepare proposals submitted to the DTIC so that regulations can be published around that. But the last time we did these reviews was in 2014, somewhere there, but it's been a while. Human resources, we are losing key personnel to the industry because we are unable to give them market-related salaries. So we are losing competent skills to the industry. But we are obviously exploring ways of partnering with other key stakeholders. We are already doing that, and we will continue to look for more partnerships. We have signed a number of memorandum of understanding, for instance, with other government departments, with other regulators, and so forth. Information technology is also a challenge. Our processes, most of them are manual. We do have a system to register entities, but it's a system that needs huge improvements. We need to be able to keep up with the credit industry. And therefore, we are working again with the International Finance Corporation to implement some of the ICT solutions in a phased approach. As soon as the funding is made available, then we can start implementing and putting in place a proper ICT system for the work that we do. Lack of amendments of the NCA, implementation of the NCA in its current form, and in some instances, obviously impacts the NCR's regulatory work. So the solution around this is that, we will be working together with the DTIC to conduct legislative amendments on the NCA. What we currently do where there are challenges in implementing the Act is that we have formed a credit industry forum where we work with the industry to come up with solutions, around the challenges that they are facing in implementing the Act. And we have been, successful in a number of areas in doing so. Next slide, please. We also have international collaborations with mainly central banks in Africa. We hosted the Bank of Namibia and Bank of Uganda, who visited the NCR on a benchmarking exercise. The main purpose of their visits was, amongst others, to look at credit information sharing legislation, the role of the NCR in data sharing, and how the NCR monitors compliance with the NCA in relation to data sharing. So we, on a yearly basis, we get delegations from different countries, especially in Africa, who want to see the work, of the NCR. Next slide, please. Okay, with your permission, Honorable Chair, I will then hand over to the CFO to take over. And I thank you.
Thank you very much. CFO.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable members. My name is Lynette Beer. I will be presenting the financial information for the NCR. The National Credit Regulator's funding model is mainly based on two sources of revenue. It is the DTIC transfer that we do receive annually, as well as the fees from registrants, which is regulated in the National Credit Act. Sorry, just let me get water. The registration fees are fixed in terms of the Act, which is what Mrs. Motshehare has referred to earlier. We are currently in the process of benchmarking, preparing a benchmark exercise, being assisted by the IFC to do that against other entities in other countries. We will also be then afterwards be compiling an industry consultation process to obtain also the views of every stakeholder, whereafter the proposal will be presented to the DTIC. Now, on our fee performance for the year, we have set a target or a budget of 51 million. We've managed to reach the 46 million threshold, which is 11% under target. That is also mainly due to the financial institutions that are closing their physical branches. Most of our big banks, they are digitizing, going away from walk-in banks at malls. They are mainly focusing their clientele that are online banking and using of banking apps. On the DTI transfer revenue, also 3% underperformance due to a pay refund. There was cost containment measures from the National Treasury, which we had to comply, and we did pay back 2.5 million to the DTIC. Other income and interest received, they are the smaller portion of our of our revenue, of our income. They are based on bank accounts that we have interest earnings on, but the bulk of that is also the PDA interest that is ring-fenced in accordance to a ministerial policy agreement that we have. That interest is only allowed to be used or utilized for certain expenditure, which includes some of our educational campaigns, as well as other activities that relate to that specific policy. If you can look at the projections towards the 23-24 financial year end, we are targeting a slightly over projected amount of 1%, which is mainly due to the interest that we are going to receive on that PDA interest account, and that is due to the higher interest rates and also an increase in interest earned from that payment distribution agencies. That is the revenue. Just want to make sure I've covered everything. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. Thank you, Paulina. The next slide will provide you with information on the expenditure progress we've spent on the targeted 106 million for Q3. We've spent 89.8 million thereof, and those targets are mainly due. We have the major component of our expenditure framework is our salary earnings, which makes up the bulk of our expenditure. Projected for the year, we have the variance of 16 million, which is the carryover from including the carryover from Q1 to 3 that hasn't been spent. Those targets that we haven't met, that is in excess of 10%. The explanation is on the next slide, but I will just go through that so you can just keep your eye on the table in front of you. So out of the total unspent of 16 million for Q1 to 3, that full 16 million will be carried forward to the last quarter because we already have plans in place to spend all of that. The premises and maintenance cost that was unspent by 1.7 million was due to some of the late procurements for services for preventative maintenance. That will and is already in progress to be spent in Q4. On the IT and information technology, the unspent amount of 2.1 million is due also to late procurement of support and maintenance. That usually goes hand in hand with your IT license renewals. So that has to go to Q4, also in the progress to be spent. Professional fees makes up the bulk of that is our legal fees that we pay to service providers to assist us with some of our major cases. The unspent amount of 5.5 million is also due to a delayed completion of specifications on the consulting services. Consumer education of 1.9 million is delayed for completion to Q4. Stakeholder communication of 0.2 million is also due to postponement of the staff wellness event that took place in January. Sorry, it took place in February. Sorry about that. And the capital replacement cost of 1.4 million is also due to be procured in Q4 against the due date for renewals of the license fees. So the NCR is not a major asset-based entity, so most of our services are related to goods and services. I think this brings me to the end of my presentation. Mrs. Motshegare, I'm handing back over to you.
Thank you, CFO. Over to you, Honorable Chair.
Okay, that concludes your presentation. Committee members, let me take your hands for interaction with the presentation. Let me just check if I'm audible, unless there is no input from committee members on your presentation. Okay, the Honorable Monakedi, proceed.
Chairperson, thank you very much. And thanks for the presentation as done. And I also want to welcome the, the good performance that the entity has been able to register. My question is in relation to the indebtedness of our people, especially per provinces. In terms of the presentation, it looks like Gauteng is the most indebted province, I think, followed by, is it KZN, Western Cape, and so forth. So I just want to check whether is that also in terms of per capita indebtedness of our people, or it's just in terms of numbers that are found in each province. I just want to get that clarity. And the other question is with regard to the general performance of the entity with regard to the various programs that they have to implement. And in terms of this report, generally, I think they have been able to perform very well and exceeded by far the targets that they set for themselves. So I want to check as to whether going forward, are they going to make sure that they adjust this accordingly so that they set the bar a little bit higher than where it is, and then the next thing always they just exceed. I just want to check whether is there a room for them to adjust during the year or maybe in the next financial year. Yeah, those are my two questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ntwane.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to be able to ask questions to the CEO and the team of the National Credit Regulator. I think mine is more an issue of a comment, and I want to commend the CEO on the presentation. I think the work that they have done is quite remarkable, and I agree with my previous speaker. And in addition to this, I'd like to align the presentation, part of the presentation with regard to the international interaction with other African countries to our program of trade and industry and competition with regard to the African Free Continental Trade Area. And that is quite commendable because in this process, I believe they are busy setting up the banking systems or assisting in setting up the banking systems to enable our fellow African countries to be able to commence, and not just commence, but interact with this program of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And then maybe the second, I could just mention that with regard to the ICT system and the manual processes that they are still operating with, I would commend them also on roping in the World Bank to assist in getting the systems up to scratch, in considering that we are already in the era of artificial intelligence, and it becomes quite critical for an institution that renders, that's basically also that's basically a watchdog, to be able to have their ICT systems up to date. So that, Chairperson, is my comment for today.
Thank you very much. Honorable Malamacha.
Thank you, Chair. Pardon me, my phone do get freeze. Sometimes I get called, man. It's difficult to respond equally to raise hands. Now, let me take this opportunity, Chair, and welcome the presentation, a report that I think it talks to ordinary poor people on the ground. To be indebted is not a child's play. And somewhere it's not by intention, that is because of circumstances. But that alone, Comrade Chair, Honorable Chair, does not give any institute right to play with the people. Instead, it must assist people not to find themselves swimming in this ocean because it's one of the worst oceans. I will want the entity to assist us in clarifying their role in education, the poor community, from falling into this trap that we all know, whether educated or not educated, once you are in, it's difficult to be out. What education programs do they have in ensuring that they kept this before it happens, rather to want to fight it? It's like when a person says prevention is better than cure. Don't wait to be affected, rather prevent it, because it's difficult to cure it. Indebtion is a very serious disease that destroyed marriages, families, and other things, including future, Honorable Chair. Now, the other issue is this fly-by-nights. What do they have in place to keep these fly-by-night kind of lenders? Others, they take IDs. You won't have life without IDs. Others, they give you on top of that so that you'll never be free at the long last. Without regarding the law, what the law says, what is it that the NCR do to ensure that this is not continuing and our people are free from debt? Others, from nowhere, you qualify. You get all these sort of loans. At the end of the day, you'll never be free. Your salary gets teared apart before it reaches its own purpose. What is it that they're doing to impact that, Honorable Chair? We appreciate the investigations, especially when it deals with some, but we are not necessarily convinced on the impact on the ground. We are saying, at what point do they sit and check whether this has got a clear, impactable role on the ground? Does it change this, what we are seeing now? Comrade Mnageli, in a form of honorable, raised Gauteng being the epicenter, bearing in mind the population there. Now, until the entity is known throughout by actions, we are not going to be free from all this. The payback, the repayment, even though we understand that the National Payment System regulation is in place, what is the relationship with that entity to ensure that our people are really not being ill-treated by a debt in a form of principal debt? Is 20 Rand, but when you repay back every month, you are 2 Rand, only half a cent go to the principal debt. The rest is going all over throughout, where you don't even know. And that particular insurance, when you lose your job, it's not taking over. Instead, it gives you 3 months to say, make a plan. How do I make a plan where I've lost job and there's no job? Then from there, they take you back it goes to my other question to say, the time of one being in the credit bureau, hey, when will we be an automatic removal of a person from the credit bureau? You took me to a credit bureau to an extent that I even gave up. Then when I proceed with my life, I'm told that you have been there, it's a process. The very same process need my money to go and clear, whereas I'm no longer owing. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Malamacha. I've been paging back to previous, I think early last year, we saw the National Credit Regulator. And you also spoke there about reviewing the registration fees. So what has happened in the year that has lapsed to that review, and what is needed? Why has the registration fees not been renewed? Because it would be interesting to hear, CEO, you mentioned that there are financial challenges. How does that those financial challenges affect the operations of the NCR? So let me give you an opportunity to answer those questions. I see Honorable Mbuyane has joined us to ask questions. Honorable Mbuyane.
Chairperson, apologies. I have a clarity-seeking question about the implementation of the National Credit Amendment Act, as was seen adopted. I don't know whether they do have a plan on that, or in terms of that, and also given the fact that we have this awareness, and in all districts we see that they are there, but now these Mashonisas are busy looting our rural poor of the people. There's Bom China there that are busy dealing with our grannies there, and also bank and IDs are staying with Mashonisa. So what are the programs that they have as an entity to deal with this anomaly and this situation? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Mbuyane. CEO, back to you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and honorable members for those questions. Let me first tackle the issue around the reason why Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and Western Cape provinces happen to be the leading provinces in terms of the amount of money or the loans extended to consumers. I think we all appreciate and understand the fact that they are nodal points these are provinces that are nodal points of economic activity. They have a lot more, economically active populations of people. And that's the reason why they are leading. So we have most credit providers, quite a number of credit providers, more credit providers registered coming from, those provinces. I'm going to ask this Executive Senior Legal Advisor, Ms. Magolego, perhaps to talk to the prevention of over-indebtedness and other enforcement action related or investigations, questions and concerns that have been raised, because she's in charge of that area, but we will help out through you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, CEO. Oh, apologies, Honorable Chair. In regards to the enforcement action that the NCR is able to take for non-compliance with the National Credit Act, including the exploitation of consumers, there are various tools that the National Credit Act has granted to the NCR, were able to refer matters to the National Consumer Tribunal, where the tribunal, if we are dealing with a registered entity, the tribunal is able to cancel or to take away the license of the entity that is found to be non-compliant with the provisions of the Act. In most instances, the tribunal also imposes administrative fines against anyone who is found to be exploiting consumers. How we normally investigate areas of non-compliance, we are able to receive complaints directly from the public, but we don't only rely on complaints. We do also use our proactive means, such as scouting various towns. We have our inspectors going around various towns to identify particularly the underground credit providers, if I can call them that, the machonistas that you can only pick up if you scout in a particular town. So one of our activities is to regularly scout various towns. We also look at social media to identify any scams that relate to the lending activities. And once we identify those activities, we organize ourselves together with the South African Police Services in order to investigate those entities that are operating underground. The reasons why we operate with the police on these unregistered entities is that most of them, as it was indicated in one of the slides, one of their ways of ensuring that consumers can repay them is to retain their ID books, their SASSA cards, or their bank cards. And in terms of the National Credit Act, such a conduct is actually a criminal offense, which is why we operate with the police to not only investigate, to take enforcement action, but to also ensure that the police can operate or open a criminal case. And we have been very successful in getting some of these entities prosecuted, and some of them have received jail terms, some of them have been fined. So the NCR is quite proactive in trying to curb these activities of exploitation of consumers when it comes to the provisions of the National Credit Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Tupan. Can I ask the CFO to talk to the review of the registration fees process? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We have, as the NCR, started with a benchmark process in the previous years. In that we did a benchmark exercise against the FSCA, and in that we have realized that some of the fees, and obviously the fee values are significantly different from that what the FSCA charges, purely because they have a different registration class, they have different client profiles. However, we did realize that some of the areas we can improve on. We do have, for instance, realized that the NCR can still charge penalties on late submission of compliance documents, which the FSCA is doing, we are not. So we did gather quite a bit of information from that exercise. But what we would like to do is, we have already done a presentation to the DTIC in that same financial year, where we were required by the DTIC, they gave us some input to proceed, and also gave us some guidance on what kind of information would be more appropriate to include in our proposal. And that would obviously include your stakeholder and industry consultation process. And at that stage, we haven't done that at the time. So we have gone back to the process, not really necessarily starting at the front. We have just realized that you need to go out on a benchmark exercise for determining the value of our fees, not necessarily just the structure thereof, but definitely on the value, because the FSCA's values and the charges that they do bill out for registrants are a lot. It's very different from what we have. And what we do, for instance, have a class that we only have a flat rate on, and whereas most of the FSC classes and also our other registrant classes do have a category where we have a fixed rate, and then as the threshold increases, the rates also changes as a percentage. So we've gained a lot of information from that exercise already. We are now taking it just a little bit further, doing the benchmark outside, probably outside South Africa, and finding out from other regulators in Africa, as well as other regulators overseas, to see how they calculate their fees. And what are the values in comparison to what their debt book values are. Currently, we do base our fee structure on the debt book value of the registrant. Thereafter, the process, unfortunately, is quite long, it's lengthy. We will, after the benchmark exercise, still have to do industry consultation. And thereafter, another presentation, the second presentation will then be to the DTIC also. So yes, we have started, as reported in your previous year, we have started that exercise, and we have managed to progress in this year a little bit, and we are taking that now forward with the next steps, and we are very excited because this is going to make the NCR one of the entities that can be competitive in the market, and which may also allow us to place less reliance on the funding that we do get from the DTIC. That is a lengthy process. Unfortunately, it does take long. Thank you, through you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, CFO. Honorable Chair, through you, I just want to respond to the other issue around the impact, that we are making on the ground, and how can we prove that we are making an impact. I did indicate, Honorable Chair, that on a quarterly basis, we produce, we evaluate the activities, education activities and enforcement action that has been taken, even though we report on enforcement action eventually, enforcement action taken during the year. We report on that at the end of the year, because enforcement in its own, by its nature, some of the enforcement actions, take long. So we will, quarterly, we produce evaluation reports. At the end of the year, we do our own impact assessment, and we will produce a report to that effect. But after 3 years, we then get an external service provider to look and assess, to assess the impact that the NCR is making on the ground, in as far as enforcement action is, is concerned, and in as far as consumer education campaigns are concerned, because we don't believe that we should do that ourselves, since we can't be a referee and a player at the same time. And the question around the implementation of the National Credit Act in as far as the debt intervention measure is concerned, there were concerns that were raised by the industry, whereby they were concerned with the unintended consequences of implementing the Act as it is. And therefore, they raised concerns with the DTIC, but we had a number of meetings between ourselves, the DTIC, the industry, and the National Consumer Tribunal. So, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we implement, this piece of legislation in a cost-effective manner. So it was important to engage the industry, to hear their views, and to also make sure that by the time it's implemented, we are happy that it's going to be implemented in a cost-effective manner. So that's the reason why it's taking this long. But yes, we will continue to engage, and I think we all understand that the importance of consulting to make sure that by the time the Act is implemented, we have the buy-in of the industry. Obviously, we may not agree with everything that the industry raises as a concern, but it is important to consult and to take their views into consideration. I don't know if there's any other question, Honorable Chair, that we may have missed, but I'd like to believe that we've covered everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CEO. Can I then give Ms. Zandile Brown an opportunity if she wants to make any concluding remarks.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and to the members. We really appreciate this opportunity that's been given to the NCR as one of the department's entities in presenting progress on the implementation of its mandate. And we will endeavor to work with them as they've indicated to ensure that all the issues that and the challenges they have are resolved. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. I think that concludes our deliberations on the presentation made by the NCR. I think they have been doing well, but I think we will continue to just keep a very close eye if we look at the outstanding issues like the registration fees, cost containment measures, and also the implementation of the National Credit Act. We will then continue to keep a close eye on the NCR. Thank you very much. That concludes our deliberations. Can I check with the committee secretary whether there are any announcements?
Chair, there's the announcement that next week we'll be meeting with the NLC and SABS on the quarterly performances, Chair. And we will also potentially look at a draft legacy report, which is not complete because we still have meetings after, but just to get the bulk of the issues out for discussion, and potentially also may consider the first draft of the second and third quarter quarterly report of the DTIC next Wednesday, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our deliberation for today, and the meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Long live the chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Bye.
Long
Thank you,
live the
Chair.
chair. Long live
Happy
the
chair,
chair.
happy chair.
Malibongwe.
Can we remove others from the platform?
We are doing that, Chair.
Okay.